So I want you to imagine walking past an $81,000 indoor waterfall, like every single day.
Wow, that is quite a budget for office decor.
Right. I mean, it's just this massive thing. The water is cascading over imported slate. The lighting is perfectly calibrated. And then one morning you realize you literally cannot hear it anymore.
Oh, because your brain just completely filters it out.
Exactly. Just mutes it. You are standing 2 feet away from rushing water and you're in complete silence. And today's deep dive is really about what happens when that exact same deafness happens to, the words we speak.
Yeah, to our coworkers, our partners, and even our parents. It's a phenomenal starting point because, I mean, we've all been in a room where the words being spoken they don't match the actual temperature of the room at all.
Yeah, but everyone is just nodding along anyway.
Right, exactly.
So we are diving into this profoundly insightful and honestly surprisingly funny text called The Secret Language of People Who Are Done. It's a 2-part ethnography written by Ida Finished, which we now know is actually the pen name of Margo Voss. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So Margo was the senior director of culture and engagement at this tech company called Vantage Dynamics. And what she actually documented, kind of by accident, was a secret dialect.
A survival language, basically.
Yeah, exactly. A language used by just completely exhausted people in modern corporate environments.
And she effectively mapped out how this language operates, how it camouflages true feelings, and the really insidious way it sort of bleeds out of the boardroom and straight into our living rooms.
Totally. And I promise you, by the time we finish this deep dive, you are never going to hear phrases like makes sense or that's interesting or we'll circle back the same way again.
Definitely not.
So let's go back to that $81,000 waterfall for a second. The Cascade Wellness element, Model 4C, I think it was called, Margo realizing she can't hear it anymore, that's really the inciting incident, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because that physical deafness perfectly mirrors her linguistic deafness. I mean, this water feature was specifically engineered to produce, like, an acoustic frequency associated with parasympathetic calm.
Right, it was supposed to make everyone feel zen.
Exactly. But the human brain is just highly adaptive. When a stimulus is constant and essentially meaningless, the brain just filters it out to conserve energy. So Margo notices the sound went first and like the physical shine on things in the office, and she suddenly realizes she's been standing inside this kind of sensory and emotional silence for months.
Which perfectly sets the stage for this critical exit interview she has, like 2 weeks later. She sits down with a colleague named Diane, and Diane just looks at her and calmly states, I think I'm done.
Delivering it like she's reading a grocery list.
Right. She delivers this massive professional news like she's reporting a mild chance of rain. So Margo, trying to be a good human, gives her this really genuine, heartfelt compliment about her work. And Diane just looks back at her and goes, that's interesting.
And that phrase right there, that is the catalyst for everything that follows.
It really is.
Because Margo recognizes in that specific moment that that's interesting. It's not a statement of curiosity at all.
No, it's a door swinging shut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a highly polite way of ending a thought that is already silently concluded in the other person's mind. Diane wasn't receiving the compliment. She was actively managing Margo's attempt to connect.
So Margo immediately starts taking notes in these classic marbled notebooks. She basically becomes a rogue anthropologist in her own office. And the glossary she builds is just devastating.
It really is. It's so spot on, it hurts.
Right. Take the phrase, makes sense. She tallies this during a single Q2 cross-functional alignment sync meeting. People say makes sense 14 times in 1 hour.
14 times.
But when you actually look closer, it has absolutely nothing to do with logic.
Not even a little bit. Margo deduces that makes sense is basically an act of intellectual surrender. If we look at this through the lens of behavioral economics, every single person in that room has independently calculated the cognitive exchange rate.
Oh, the exchange rate between actually arguing a point and simply nodding.
Right. Nodding is cheaper. It's a defensive maneuver to conserve mental calories in an environment where, honestly, debate is just penalized by longer meetings. It's not about sense. It's about making sure no one is asked to prove the logic.
Wow. Yeah, she also documents something she calls the terminal smile, which is this facial expression that looks like a building where all the lights are on, but the tenant moved out weeks ago.
I love that description. Closure worn on the outside.
Yeah, but the one that really got me is the prefine pause. Margo actually calls it the event horizon.
Oh, the mechanics of that pause are just fascinating. It's a 3-second delay before someone answers a question with the word fine.
Just 3 seconds.
Right, but neurologically, what is happening during those 3 seconds is this massive internal conflict. The limbic system, which is the emotional center of the brain, it wants to scream or cry or argue.
It wants to fight back.
Exactly. But the prefrontal cortex intervenes, calculates the social and professional cost of that honesty, and overrides the emotion. And it takes roughly 3 seconds for that suppression to occur. If the pause crosses that 3-second threshold, the word fine officially becomes a ceasefire.
It makes me think of a car's check engine light.
Oh, how so?
Like it's flashing red on the dashboard, warning you of this catastrophic failure. But instead of taking the car to a mechanic, someone just slaps a piece of black electrical tape over the light.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
The engine is still completely failing, but everyone in the car is just politely agreeing to stare at the tape and pretend it isn't. But I do have a serious bone to pick with Margo here.
Okay, let's hear it.
She was the director of culture. She literally designed the company's employee satisfaction surveys. Isn't she the one handing out the black electrical tape in the first place? Like, didn't she build the very machine forcing people to speak this way?
Well, the text is great, because Margo does not let herself off the hook for that. She confronts that tragic irony head-on. She acknowledges that, yes, she personally designed the Vantage Pulse dashboard.
Right, the software tracking everybody.
Yeah, the software that flagged employees as disengaged months before they actually quit. So the machine was working perfectly. It knew they were leaving.
But no one did anything.
Exactly. Everyone, including Margo, was simply too exhausted, stuck in these back-to-back meetings, to actually act on bad news that arrived as, like, a metric on a screen rather than a human face. She built the machine, sure, but she realizes the machine isn't the core issue. The issue is a systemic lack of human energy required to actually process the truth.
So because the machine failed, Margo effectively goes underground. She transforms from this passive observer just taking notes into an active translator for her coworkers. And this black market of honesty is born.
And people just start seeking her out. A great example in the text is Jamie, this 22-year-old intern.
Yeah, the beige verdict.
Yes. Jamie comes out of her performance review completely confused because her manager told her that her work was, quote, solid.
Which means nothing.
Literally nothing. Margo has to explain to Jamie that solid is a word engineered to deliver 0 actionable data. Managers use it when they either have too many direct reports to actually observe the work, or they are just terrified of confrontation.
So Margo coaches Jamie to go back in and demand a specific noun, right?
Right. She tells her to ask, what is one tangible thing you want me to do differently? And Jamie does it. She forces the manager out of the beige language, and she actually ends up getting a full-time offer.
That's awesome. So Margo is translating for the interns, but the real structural breakthrough happens when she meets Theo. He's a 26-year-old facilities tech, and they have this crucial conversation in a concrete stairwell with no badge reader.
Which is key, right? A place where the company cannot track their movement.
Exactly. And in that stairwell, Theo delivers what the book calls Theo's Law.
Yeah, Theo points out this fundamental truth about labor. He says corporate language only stays honest when the words are connected to something that will actually break if you lie.
Like a physical consequence.
Exactly. Theo works on the elevators. If he lies about an elevator being fixed, a physical cable snaps and human beings get trapped in a metal box, there are immediate physical and legal consequences to his words.
And I really want you, the listener, to think about your own job for a second. Try to evaluate where you sit on that spectrum, because this really makes me wonder, if you work in an abstract department like strategy or branding or even culture like Margo did, are those jobs inherently doomed to become dishonest?
That's the big question.
Right. Simply because there is no physical elevator cable to snap.
Well, Theo's law heavily implies that when words are decoupled from physical reality, they inevitably become decorative. If the consequence of a lie in the strategy department is just, another meeting or maybe a missed Q3 target, then management quietly revises downward anyway.
The language just softens.
It softens. It loses its teeth. Without tangible consequences, jargon is just the natural endpoint of abstract work.
Wow. So Theo has an elevator that will physically break if he lies. But upstairs in the C-suite, the CEO, Bryce Holloway, doesn't have an elevator. He just has this massive budget, which explains exactly why, when Bryce discovers this organic underground translation ring, his first instinct isn't to participate in it.
No, his instinct is to buy it.
To buy it.
Yeah.
We enter this whole phase Margo calls the laminated theft. The VP of strategy sniffs out the rumor of the black market, reports it to Bryce, and Bryce immediately hires an external, certified culture strategist to monetize the whole concept.
They literally turn Margot's desperate organic survival mechanism into a mandatory 90-minute corporate workshop called Authentispeak.
Authentispeak with a trademark symbol. It is just peak corporate absurdity. They print out laminated cards for the staff, and the cards instruct employees that if they want to say, "That's interesting," they should instead say, "I'm genuinely curious to learn more about that."
Which is the exact same thing, just longer.
They took the camouflage and just painted it a brighter color. And to cap it off, Bryce spends $14,000 on a custom pink neon sign for his hallway that reads, "Radical candor starts here."
What's fascinating here is Margot's emotional response to all this. You would completely expect her to be furious that her work was stolen and commercialized. But standing in front of that $14,000 glowing sign, she actually feels this profound sense of relief.
I have to admit, I found that reaction completely baffling at first. Why on earth is she relieved that they hijacked her movement?
Because she realizes that while they stole the vocabulary, it is impossible to productize the underlying meaning. You cannot trademark the sound of a door closing.
Ah, I see.
The underground network simply adapts. They just start hiding their actual exhaustion behind the new, mandated, Authentispeak vocabulary. The resistance continues. It just uses approved corporate synonyms now.
But I do have to play devil's advocate for Bryce here for a minute. He runs a massive company. Isn't productizing a concept exactly what a CEO is supposed to do? Like, you can't run a 5,000-person organization on stairwell whispers. He needed a scalable system. Is he actually actively malicious, or is he just doing his job?
I think you're confusing scale with connection there. Bryce essentially discovered a flourishing community garden that his employees planted just to survive, and his solution was to pave it over with concrete and then paint pictures of vegetables on top.
Oh, that's brutal, but accurate.
Right. He replaced a living, breathing ecosystem with a static, mandatory policy. Men like Bryce are just structurally blind to the fact that genuine human connection is the one thing a corporate budget literally cannot mandate.
That makes total sense. But the real tragedy of the language of done is that you can't just leave it at the office, right? Exhaustion doesn't just clock out at 5 p.m. Margo realizes that this cognitive surrender she practices all day at work has silently infected her own marriage.
Yeah, the ethnography takes a very intimate turn here. It's a Sunday morning. Her husband, Paul, is rummaging around looking for a phone charger next to the bed, but instead he pulls out Margot's 4 marbled notebooks.
Oh, no.
And he opens volume 3, which literally has "Do Not Show Paul" explicitly written on the cover.
That is just a stomach-dropping moment.
Truly. He reads these entries where Margo has meticulously cataloged his own done language over the years. She documented how he dismissed the idea of getting a dog with a terminal. Think about it. But the real gut punch for Paul is the entry about the elevator mirror. Margo had written about this specific morning where they were standing in their apartment building elevator. Paul looked at her reflection and asked what was wrong. Margo said nothing. Paul said, "Okay." And in the notebook, Margo writes that neither of them believed the other, and far worse, neither of them minded.
It's the caloric expenditure of an argument again. It was just easier to lie in the elevator than to spend the mental energy fighting right before work. But when Paul confronts her about the notebooks, he doesn't even yell.
No, he doesn't.
He just looks at her and says, "I want to mind. I think I forgot how."
It completely breaks the spell.
It does. They end up going to couples therapy in this completely unglamorous office situated right above a dry cleaner. And this is where they finally figure out the actual antidote to this language.
Yeah, the therapist helps them realize the antidote isn't the word fixed, because fixed is just a fantasy that pretends a door was never closed in the first place.
Right, sweeping it under the rug.
Exactly. And it certainly isn't the word fine, which we already know closes the door forever.
Yeah.
The vital word they land on is still.
Still.
Still, meaning ongoing.
Yeah.
It operates in the present tense. It is the act of admitting the difficulty was real, the exhaustion was real, but actively choosing to keep showing up on the far side of it. It requires continuous effort.
I really want to pause here and ask you to reflect on your own relationships for a second. Like, how often do you use phrases like, I'm flexible or whatever you want or make sense with your partner entirely just to avoid the caloric expenditure of friction. It is terrifyingly easy to slip into that decorative wallpaper language at home.
It really is.
So what does this all mean for Margo? She manages to resuscitate her communication at home, which means she now has to carry that honesty back into the office, doesn't she?
She does. Armed with a renewed ability to speak the truth in her marriage, the structural dishonesty advantage dynamic just becomes physically intolerable for her. She realizes she has to leave.
And the way she does it is iconic.
She executes her resignation using the ultimate corporate camouflage. She puts a 15-minute meeting on Bryce's calendar with the subject line, touching base.
It's brilliant. She completely weaponizes the jargon against him.
She walks in, no notes, no slide deck, no authentic-speak cards, and just plainly says, I'm resigning. And Bryce is caught completely off guard. He is suddenly in this high-stakes emotional situation, and his brain just reaches for the nearest available safe sentence. He looks at her and says, well, that's interesting.
Oh, wow. He uses the exact phrase. He doesn't even realize he's closing the door on her. It is just the ultimate validation of her entire year of research.
Totally.
So fast forward to book 2 of the ethnography. Margo actually publishes her notebooks under the pseudonym Ida Finished. The book explodes in popularity, and Bryce Halloway actually reads it.
Which is wild.
But he completely fails to recognize that it is a direct autopsy of his own company. And he reaches out to the author's publisher to hire her for a corporate retreat.
And Margo actually accepts the meeting. She returns to Vantage Dynamics wearing the exact same gray blazer she resigned in, sits in the exact same chair in Bryce's office, and drops the pseudonym. She reveals she is Ida Finished, and she walks him through every excruciating detail that the book is about: his steering committees, his laminated cards, his neon sign.
Bryce is just stunned. Stripped of his corporate armor, his only defense is to quietly mutter that the sign costs $14,000, which he does finally take down, to be fair.
True. But pulling a neon sign off a wall does not fix a broken machine.
It really doesn't.
And this raises the central question about systemic change in the text. A few months after Margo leaves, Theo, the intern Jamie, a coworker named Priya, and several others actually organize a union.
Wow.
Yeah, and they win the vote, 62 to 38. That is the structural evolution. Margo realizes that the underground translation network she ran was just a bandage. It relied entirely on her own exhausted goodwill. Honesty, if it is going to survive long-term in an abstract environment, requires structural teeth. It requires binding contracts that force management to tell the truth.
But let me challenge that conclusion for a second. Margo left the company to save herself. Theo and Priya stayed behind to do the grueling work of actually organizing a union. Does Margo's story suggest that abandoning a toxic system is the only brave choice? Or is it braver to stay in the burning building and try to put out the fire?
Margo actually wrestles heavily with that guilt in the second book. She ultimately concludes that both leaving and staying are legitimate forms of honesty, provided they are active choices. Leaving isn't inherently brave, and staying isn't inherently cowardly.
Right.
The dialect of done only demands one thing, that whatever you choose it out loud deliberately, with your eyes open, rather than just drifting into the decision by default because you were too tired to choose otherwise.
That is such a powerful distinction. And just when Margo thinks she has closed the book on this language, she does a public radio interview to promote the ethnography. And her 71-year-old mother, Ruta, happens to be listening in her kitchen.
This is honestly the most profound revelation in the entire two-part series. Ruta calls Margo after the broadcast. Now, Ruta had worked as a claims processor for 31 years. She was unceremoniously laid off via mass email just months before she was set to retire.
Just brutal.
And for the last 3 decades, Margo realized she had only ever heard her mother describe her day with these flat, defensive sentences like, "it was fine," or "nothing to report."
So Margo drives out to her mother's house, and they have this really raw, painful confrontation at the kitchen table. Ruta finally drops the mask. She admits to her daughter that she used that flat language her whole life because she felt entirely disposable. She was terrified of looking vulnerable or weak in front of a corporate hierarchy that had already decided she didn't matter. But then, breaking this 30-year silence, Ruta looks at Margo plainly and directly and tells her how proud she is of her.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely shifts Margo's paradigm. She realizes that done is not just some modern tech industry phenomenon. It's not just about Q2 alignment sinks or ping pong tables in break rooms. It is a fundamental human border that you have to keep crossing your entire life.
Yeah.
Ruta is the oldest fluent speaker of the dialect Margo knows. And there's this deeply moving detail at the end. Before Ruta passes away, Margo finds her mother's copy of the book. In the margins, right next to the glossary entry for the word still, Ruta had underlined it 3 times, pressing so hard the pen nearly tore through the paper.
Oh, wow. It is just incredible to consider how we inherit our emotional vocabulary from our parents without even realizing it. We learn how to suppress, how to pause for 3 seconds, how to say fine, just by watching the adults around us survive their own exhaustion. If done is an inherited language, how on earth do we actively unlearn it before we pass it down to the next generation?
Well, we unlearn it by consistently refusing the smaller, safer sentence. It requires a daily, ongoing cognitive effort to say the true thing, even when it is uncomfortable, and especially when simply nodding would be so much cheaper. You have to actively choose the friction.
Look at the incredible, unexpected journey we just took. We started with an $81,000 water feature that effectively silenced a room. We moved through a black market of translation in a concrete stairwell to a marriage desperately trying to communicate above a dry cleaner.
Right.
We saw a union vote give honesty actual legal teeth. And finally, we ended with a mother and daughter learning to speak the truth across a kitchen table.
It is a really powerful reminder that speaking the true language isn't about being combative or just picking fights for the sake of it. It is entirely about paying close, relentless attention to which side of the door you are currently standing on.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Take a hard look around your own life. Look at your job, your marriage, your friendships. What is the load-bearing sentence in your life that you have quietly replaced with decorative wallpaper? What is the failing engine you are politely ignoring with a piece of black tape? And what would happen if you peeled that tape back right now and said the actual terrifying thing underneath?